All right, welcome to our very first book club live series event, DigLead Book Club. Welcome to the book club. I'm excited that you are here. And you know what? It's also a Tuesday that we're just excited that technology works because sometimes it doesn't. And we have to roll with those punches. But today we are doing good. Let me know who is joining our very first book club hang today. And I'm excited for this new series to bring in folks who are featured in the book. Whether you have the book yet, if you're ever going to buy it or not, this is going to be a cool opportunity to build community and conversation around a topic that is very near and dear to me, but what leadership looks like in digital spaces for the intent to have an impact in all types of contexts. So we are streaming live right now on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, and goodness, it was supposed to stream on LinkedIn, but that little platform just wasn't happy with me. So we're going to hopefully stream live there on a different week because this book club series is going to be going live every single week for the next couple months, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Central Time. And I'm going to be inviting in guests to chat with them who are included in the book. And so again, you're going to get an insider's take on what they're up to, what I featured about them in the book. And then we're just going to unpack what leadership and the realities of the internet are like right now. And of course, because I'm going live, that means that we want lots of interaction and chit chat and chatter. So feel free to add those comments. Again, say hello, let us know that you are joining here today. In case you don't know me, that maybe you just happened upon this video, my name is Josie Alquist, and I am the very proud author. I almost said mom because it kind of feels like I'm the mom of this book, Digital Leadership in Higher Ed, a purposeful, oh my gosh, I totally forgot the subheading of the book. Purposeful social media in a connected world. Okay, there's only so much brain space in this little mishmash head of mine. The main title is the most important thing, right? So this book was released 2 weeks ago today. There was a fun kickoff. We had a book launch party, all those things you can find in my feeds and all those good things. And then I realized I want to keep conversations up and not just to market the book, even though of course, we need to let lots of people know about it. But I want to continue conversations and to bring the book to life. Because we also know the reality of the internet and social media is that it does not stop changing just because you publish something. So there's going to be platforms that change, people that change positions and realities. And so having conversations on a platform just like this allows for that transformation and evolution in real time. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that book, you're going to head to my website, josiealquist.com/digital leadership. You can learn more, even read the table of contents, learn about all the features and the resources. But of course, in addition to this book club series, I'm also kicking off a digital community for readers of the book, which is also a little bit like a book club, which is where these videos are also going to live in a digital community called the Digital Leadership Network, hosted on a platform called Mighty Network. So it might be a new social media space for you. And you'll just head to digitalleadership.mn.co and join us there, where we're going to, again, bring out our reflections, our opinions, and even the exercises in the book in this digital community. So let me know, again, who you are, if you are joining us live or if you're catching the replay. And also let me know if you have picked up the book. I do know there is, unfortunately, a little bit of a delay from the publisher in mailing out those darn printed copies. So I do greatly apologize for that. a little frustrating, not gonna lie, but all in good time. You can get the digital version like Kindle and Apple Books and all those things right away. So would love to know who has picked that up so we can celebrate. Okay, so as promised, every single week in this live stream series, I'm inviting in folks that I have talked about in the book so you can actually meet them in the real internet flesh. And today I'm inviting in one very special guest who served in a multitude of roles behind the scenes about the book, which we are going to talk about in just a little bit. Now, I snagged her bio from her blog, which understandably, maybe she hasn't blogged since the beginning of this little pandemic, but even the ones she did are so good and juicy as a writer and as a content contributor. So Kristen Abell is a writer, a web developer, and mental health advocate. Her pronouns are she, her, hers. She has been writing her memoir for a few years now, but she promises she'll finish it someday. I know how that goes in finishing writings. You might even get to see some parts of it on her blog. She is a partner of a pretty amazing guy, and she's a mom to a spectacularly intelligent and funny teenager who takes after her. She also likes the cross-stitch, snarky comments and occasionally plays the piano. She develops the occasional website and has done most things in higher ed, from being an academic advisor to running a student housing department. No easy feat. But most recently, she's serving as an interim role overseeing communications in a student affairs division and is glad to be interim. All right, Kristen, good friend, welcome to the book club.
Hello, hello. So glad I could be here.
I have to talk about your shirt. It's pretty great. Book I got it.
I should have added in my bio. I can't believe I don't have it in there that I read a ridiculous amount of books. So it is, it's appropriate. It fits. It pretty much describes who I am.
It's so fitting. There is a section on your blog just about the books you have read, even if it was from a while ago. And I mean, there's just definitely no competition. The amount that you read is very, very impressive, and the amount that you write. Again, I'm so excited to have you on this very first live stream. It's always nice to have a friendly face that I'm very familiar with from years gone by. And so we're not going to talk about how many years that's been, but we met in the very, very early days of Twitter, at least in higher ed and student affairs, on this little weekly, and then it turned into bi-weekly, and then twice a day, 4 times, I don't know, Twitter chat called SA Chat. And I thought it'd be fun to just have a little throwback on that before we dig into the current days.
Yeah, that's where I've connected with a lot of student affairs folks online. And I still have many, many friends that I occasionally get to visit and see that I first connected with through SA Chat.
And obviously, all platforms change over time. We can't really control all of that. But SA Chat is also I don't even think there might be a chat that might happen. It got too big and then a little performative. But I do feel quite lucky that I feel like I got into the tail end of when it was like real good and really about relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I was an early adopter in there. And so, I wasn't one of the very first people. I was definitely early in there. And I know NASPA took it on a couple years ago and has been trying to rejuvenate it. I did get to serve as a moderator for a while. I did do that for, I think, a year or two. That's a pretty intense job. And I say that, as somebody who's been a housing director. But I did get to participate in a lot of that from the beginning and or fairly close to the beginning. And like I said, just some really great relationships have come out of that.
Yeah. The internet can be pretty fantastical when you've got some intentions behind it. Well, so talking about what you're doing right now, so you are in an interim role, the director of communications for student affairs at Virginia Tech, which is also quite the feat of a campus. And of course, we consider what it feels and is like during this little, like pandemic that we're having right now. Which emoji would best describe what it means to be a communications professional during COVID?
I feel like the poop emoji, right? Like that's obvious. That's the obvious answer.
Yeah.
It's that. Some days it's the eye roll emoji, I think is sometimes appropriate as well. Or the one that I use a lot, I don't even know what it's called, but the one with the teeth, like where he's gritting his, yeah.
Yeah.
That one is a lot where I'm just like, oh, I don't really want to have to communicate this, but I know I have to communicate this, right?
Or it's something that you just saw, like a comment you just got. Ooh. You know how you can look on your phone and it tells you like, hey, I think these are the most commonly used emojis you use. It can be very telling.
Yeah. Oh, that one in the rolling on the floor laughing, like that one. I use that a lot.
Uh-huh.
Like, what else can you do, right? Some days.
Sure. Just roll on the floor. That's how I felt writing the book a little bit. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Well, so you also supervise and support a number of digital communicators in the communications team. So what are you finding your role, not just outwardly communicating, but what your team is kind of needing right now? What have you found to be very helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the hardest things about our current situation is it's super hard to be strategic because everything changes. You make a strategy, and then the next day, everything changes. And so, in supporting my communicators, we've really leaned towards more of the positive stuff in our student affairs social media. But I work really heavily with our university social media, and that tends to be more answering questions and all of that. And so, my job has been much more heavily involved in supporting folks by finding out the answers, right? Like, and I spend a lot of time, a lot of my day finding out the answers. I don't always have them. Sometimes I do, but I don't always have them. And so I have to figure out not only, and this has been interesting because I started in this role in November of last year. So I had less than 6 months to learn enough about the university to know even who to ask the questions of, right? Mm-hmm. But I spent that's the majority of my time is really just finding out answers to stuff and trying to anticipate what the questions might be too is a large piece of that as well. And hoping that I can do enough and get enough information that those folks then can answer the questions and aren't under fire all the time. And I want to be like that supportive colleague and supervisor that can make those jobs slightly less stressful right now.
Yeah, it's another interesting element of working in communications is you're also chasing down the information, but also in your case, trying to communicate it even internally to your team. So it's interesting. You've brought up that the position is interim, and we're seeing a lot of folks go into interim positions right now with budgets so in flux, or even positions being promoted potentially as interim. So what's something maybe that you've learned or you've been able to kind of come to peace with, knowing that we live already so much into the unknown? And so when you tap on that into our workplaces, what might be something that you would want to give advice for with interim role?
Yeah, sure. I think I am maybe not as common as far as like, I love being in uncertain situations. Like, I kind of like to see what could play out. My partner does not feel that way at all. And so that's kind of fun sometimes. I think he would love me to pin down what I want to do with my life. Someday I'll figure out what I want to do when I grow up. But yeah, one of the biggest things I think that or one of the biggest strengths of being in an interim role is there's times where I can say stuff and I don't have to worry that like this is going to impact me for years to come. And I mean, it could. And so I am still judicious in how I think about things, but sometimes I'm able to say things that other people around the table are not willing to say because they're more worried about the security of the position than they are about getting the information or about correcting something that's out there that's wrong or whatever. And so I really try to be careful and judicious in how I do that. But it also can be really powerful as well, I think, and allows me to ask questions and to question people in leadership sometimes when I need to, in a way that I think some folks in more permanent positions don't feel as comfortable doing.
Yeah, sounds very freeing.
In
having that framework.
I should say I don't really keep my mouth shut, even in my permanent positions in the past. I haven't been great at that. So I don't know that this is more free for me, but I'm going to assume that I'm slightly more free. Maybe that's something to take into it as well.
To unpack, sure. So, of course, not only because we've been connected for so long, but the reason why I invited you on is because you are one of the features of the book, but also behind the scenes, what folks may not know is you really got me through my own little pandemic last fall when the book needed to, just receive a little, like an inch or two off the ends, in more like it needed to be not completely shaved down. I don't think I want to go with the hair analogy anymore. maybe I just have some FOMO of how cool your hair looks and how much of a baby I am if I was to ever try to do something like that. But Kristen helped me meet the necessity of what the publisher was asking in doing some pretty heartbreaking cuts to the book. And it is why the book took longer to get out. But you know what? There's certain things you're like, yeah, I can overcome this challenge. I can do this thing. And also you have to look, and maybe I've learned this a little bit from business too. Like, it's not just a time is money. It's like, there's also a mental health aspect to it. And what's just completely beyond my, I don't know, even the word for it, when you have to ask for help. And so I came to you asking for help and we got through it. I mean, it took all last fall to do a few different rounds of major cuts and not just your skills as a writer and editor, but just your energy allowed for me both to grieve, but also to feel like, okay, we're making action, we're making movement. And so I just wanted to publicly let people know about that. And thank you very, very much. She is designated in the dedication section as a Wonder Woman because she is, and because it is kind of on brand for her. And for me a little bit. So that was fun to be able to do.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. It was in a lot of ways, it was perfect timing because I was still new enough in my roles that I wasn't totally absorbed in them and had that extra energy to give. And it's a great topic and I love the book. And I have read the book at this point. So if if y'all haven't read the book, you need to read the book. It's a great book. I can endorse it. And it, editing is always an interesting thing. Like I love editing, but I also am always very sensitive to the person I'm editing. And so Josie probably saw my comments go from like, I'm really sorry, this may not, I know this is a really good thing, but I think it would help if you cut this or whatever, to by the time we were through, I'm like, just cut this part, right? Like we don't need this part. Yeah. But managing that like emotional, like heartache of like, oh, I know I can tell that she really put a lot into this section of the book, but we have to cut something. And maybe this is the best thing to cut.
Well, and to attest to your character, your feature is along with another one of our colleagues, Sue Caulfield, because you created this series called The Committed Project, which I wrote about in the book, about a collaborative digital storytelling advocacy project, which we'll talk about in a minute. And some of these features, they're not just like a paragraph, they're like a page or two. And I don't even know what you said in your comment, but you were like, I understand if you have to cut this, like, like, I mean, because both like giving me permission, but also stating like, I think it's great too, right? Like advocating for yourself. But
I would really hate for this to go, but I understand if it needs to go.
Yeah, because that's what the publisher really wanted to take out, a majority of the features. And for me, just the framework without the stories, it felt kind of empty. And especially the topic, again, that we're going to talk about in a minute, that you and Sue focused on for so long, it just fit too perfectly. So, but you also, again, early days of Twitter, and now you're communications professional, and just the experiences of the internet. You had some interesting things to say that were also featured in the book. You talked about social media is a great equalizer, and that social media also allows us to assess our work and our effectiveness, to hear what students are actually saying, kind of being a two-way relationship, so we can listen as well as share. And again, what I shared in the book launch, kickoff, and party was that this thing was submitted the day before we went into quarantine. So, like obviously before pandemic times, but I still think you probably have that philosophy with this work, is that we have to hear, it has to be two-way. Sometimes those emojis can be very cringing as we get in some of those comments, but maybe talk a little bit more about just kind of your philosophy about social media being this equalizer.
Yeah. I learned kind of early days when I would be tweeting more. I don't tweet as much as I used to, but especially early days when I was tweeting a lot, if I was tweeting like good, solid content, I had people listening to me, right? And I think that's the important thing. It's not just like when we're talking about equalizing, I'm not just saying some Joe Schmo off the street compared to somebody who's actually doing research or learning about something or has knowledge about content. But oftentimes we have folks who don't have access to certain positions, or, haven't been able to climb the ladder or whatever. Maybe don't want to climb the ladder. I don't know. It depends. But I think that if they are sharing good, like quality content, and are willing to engage with people and talk about that content, a lot of times people will look to them as experts as much as they will look to somebody with a VP by their title, or a president or director by their title, right? And so in that way, it really taught me that, like, Twitter especially, but like any social media, really comes down to, what are you actually putting out on there? What is the content you're putting out on there? And it's much more about content than titles in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think that even came out in, I was doing a little digging on you, as one does on the internet, about their friends and colleagues. Is your LinkedIn bio, your very last sentence, you say, values learning and making a difference in the world. And every single person in the book was asked to answer the question. And so are going to readers be asked the question, what is your why for leading online? Why the heck is it worth your time? What is your purpose in order to use these tools within your set of values? And you said, I want to show people they are not alone in experiencing mental illness, and provide support and resources to help them be successful. Which again is so telling to what was featured in the book. But if you want to share anything more about like what's, like people are jumping off Facebook left and right. Like in the US, we have an election coming, hashtag fake news, Twitter has changed, whatever. In what ways currently have you found you still being drawn to certain platforms to enact that why?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. And I love it when you quote this stuff back to me. I'm like, oh God, what did I say like a year ago? Like it that's so accurate. I was relieved to hear that, like, yes, actually that still fits. Yeah, I think I know I struggle with Facebook, and also it is my favorite of them, favorite of the media that I use, because I'm a words person. And I feel like I can tell longer stories and share more information there. Sometimes I will post something longer on Facebook and then chop it up for tweets or whatever. But I find that most of the time, if I post something like that on Facebook, I get higher engagement and am able to actually have conversations with folks about it. That being said, there's a lot I don't like about Facebook, and that morally, the company, Zuckerberg, all that sort of stuff makes me kind of ick. But I do feel like I've been able to engage people around issues that I think are important. And I think that the biggest challenge with all of it, of course, is the echo chamber that we sometimes build. When we delete people or block people or whatever that don't agree with us. Now, I think there's disagreeing with us, and then there's belligerent disagreeing, and I totally get the difference between those two, and why it can be important to block those folks. And also, just the mental health drain that can be sometimes when you have somebody who consistently comes after you. So of those, I think Facebook is the one I'm probably most active on when it comes to engaging folks around mental health and talking about that. And that still is one of my primary areas. I recently shared, actually, on both Facebook and Twitter, September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And I talk a little bit about that and what my experience has been in that area and why it's important to me, and what you can do. I think you'll see the difference in what I typically post is I try to share my personal story around that. I believe storytelling is one of the best ways that we can connect people with issues and to take away fear, right? Like there's something about knowing somebody who's experienced something or who, is a part of a group that we're afraid of, that helps, knowing their story, that helps break down some of those barriers there. And so I strongly believe that. I also, in sharing my story on there, I typically avoid a lot of the canned posts that agencies and organizations create a lot of the times, because I see, every once in a while I see in my feed like, oh, you're important, we care about you, here's the hotline number. I will never call a hotline from that, right? Like that's not really connecting with me. That's not really telling me or helping me connect with somebody that can really listen to me and understand those things and knows what I'm going through. And so I think it's so important to share a little bit more about that, to share the story behind it as well.
And that is a huge takeaway I hope folks hear from the book, even if they don't embrace this word leader, is us just simply showing up and telling our story, even in simple moments to like significant celebrations. And I think early on, you were like blogging about tech and you were a woman in higher ed. I was like, ooh, who is that? But also I was finding you posting about mental health. And it was during a time where I just left my full-time job just to do school. And I was struggling with like this newfound anxiety and some like pockets of panic attacks that I'd never experienced. And so I would hear like maybe your past experiences or something and feel like more validated, but also that, I wasn't crazy, that I could not like rationalizing things, but also seeking resources. And other folks are like, oh, there's other people in our field that are struggling with this. And maybe this is why, or again, resources around it. So to see this project of the Committed Project be created between you and Sue Caulfield, which was a blog and podcast and these downloadable resources, and with the goal of breaking down the stigmas of mental illness for higher ed professionals, because there's a variety of different topics that different fields run from, and especially within student affairs, to have really direct conversations about the mental health impacts of these positions is critically important. So what have you found was the reason? What were things that you were seeing for what was being ignored in higher ed? And what were some ways that you tried to bring that to the surface through, digital storytelling?
Yeah. So back when we first started, there was an article that came out about, and I can't remember if it was Chronicle or Inside Higher Ed, that had a story from somebody who worked in higher ed who was experiencing suicidal ideation, I think was the story topic, and that we don't talk about it. And there was this big flurry of like, yes, me too, me too, me too. And then it like disappeared, right? Like, and nobody talked about it again for a while. And when I shared my story, like you said, early days of SA Chat, I wrote a blog post about experiencing depression, one of the scariest things I've ever done, because then I shared it with my professional network, which felt weird, but also felt appropriate, because I do think that there are aspects of our jobs that are linked to our mental health. And so I shared that and had a very similar response, like, me too, me too. And like, it was very clear to me that there was more to be done here. And I think, you mentioned what I said earlier, that like part of the telling my story is to let people know they're not alone. Sue came to me, I think it was shortly before or shortly after I did a cha-cha at ACPA right around that time about my experience, which same thing, like I went up and did this, and I had so many people afterwards come up to me while I was there and tell me that either they had experienced issues with mental health, or somebody they knew, or a family member or friend or whatever. And Sue came to me and was like, hey, I think we need to, or I want to do something longer term. I want to do something that doesn't just disappear, right? Like the minute the issue is over. And so we started with Mental Health Awareness Month, which is in May. And Sue is an artist, and she's outstanding, and said, what would you think about a comic? And I'm like, well, like, I'm not a visual person. Like, I am not a pictures person. But what if we did a comic along with like somebody's story, right? So we tell the story, and then the comic illustrates certain parts of it. And that's really how we kind of started putting that together and brainstorming all of that. And so we put out the first call, right? And it was for a month of posts. And we were like, oh, maybe we'll get like 4 posts, 4 people that want to share. And then we'll have 1 a week. It'll be great. We can do that. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves in for. We put out a call. We had enough people to fill every single weekday of that month, respond. Yeah. And, just from a breadth of experiences, right? Like it was everything from my parent to me to I don't experience it, but I have friends that do, and they've taught me these things to know. And so it was a really broad range of that. And so that was kind of the first real inkling to us that like, there's something here, right? Like we can't just do this one time and then walk away from it. We need to keep doing stuff. Now, the fun part about being 2 people who also experience mental illness, who are trying to do a project about mental illness on the side of our paid gigs and with families and all that sort of stuff, is that sometimes we don't get to spend as much time on it as we'd like, right? And so I know we haven't been as active on that recently, but it is still something that I'm very passionate about, and that I still do advocacy around, and that I think continues to remain relevant. And I know, like, I've seen people share the posts, from that first month of posts, there is a book that folks have read in their grad programs, which I think is awesome. And I think it's really relevant. And, I hope that we can continue at some point, continue to collect stories, but I think there's more to be done there. That's not just collecting stories, but the next step, which is, okay, what do we do to support those people now, right? We have, like you said, there's downloadable resources. There's the toolkit on the website and all of that, that I think has been really helpful. I know I do trainings from time to time with folks. I've done some webinar trainings and also trainings on my previous campus around supporting the people that you work with who might experience mental illness, and also just how to take care of yourself as somebody who experiences mental illness in higher ed.
And do you feel like during this time during this, all those silly sayings that now we say so we don't have to say COVID or pandemic or whatever. Do you feel like we're having more open and honest conversations about mental health for us as higher ed professionals, or in the midst of crisis, has that even gotten swept further under the rug?
I would say from my experiences and from the conversations that I've had with friends at other institutions, I think what we're seeing is more conversations about it, but less movement forward. So we know that you're hurting. We know that you're having a hard time, and we still need to do the work. And I think that that's challenging. And as somebody who is a leader in an office, it's a challenging, I know that I have people on my staff that, I want to help and I want to support. And also I need these 3 things that I need to get done today. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a really, really challenging dynamic. And we haven't really done a good job thinking about how to solve that on a larger scale, and what that looks like. So yes, I do think we're talking about it more. I just don't know that it's doing anything other than talking about it right now.
Yeah, we need to make the next step forward. Well, considering that question, other than downloading the Calm app, what are tangible resources for someone who is listening, where they're trying to take a little bit more care of themselves and their mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I think, understanding is always a big part of it. I use spoon theory. Have you heard of spoon theory? Do you know spoon theory? So there's a blog post that's out there, and I don't know how to say her name, but I'm going to try. Kristen Abell, who had a chronic illness, lupus, I believe, and she was trying to explain to a friend what it was like to live with lupus. And they were in a diner. And so she gave her friend a bunch of spoons and said, okay, I'm going to walk you through a day. These are all the spoons you get for that day. And she would explain to her, she goes, okay, what have you done today? She goes, oh, well, I got out of bed and showered. She goes, you need to slow down. You got out of bed. You need to give me one of your spoons. You took a shower. You need to give me one of your spoons. You drove in rush hour traffic. You need to give me 2 spoons for that. And so slowly but surely her friend goes through her day and realizes she's at the end of the day and has 1 spoon, and she's still at work in this scenario. And so she's like, all right, well, you can either drive home and go to bed, or you can make yourself dinner, but you can't do both. You don't have enough energy left to do both. And it's this idea of people with chronic illnesses and mental illnesses often have limited energy. It's not just unending. And so I think that spoon theory, 1, helps us understand for ourselves when we're running low, and it helps us identify and quantify that. And it helps us make decisions, right? Learning to say no. Like, I know at the end of the day that I literally cannot do another Zoom meeting. I just can't, right? My energy is completely depleted. If I participate in that Zoom meeting, I know that it's going to be a subpar experience for everybody there. I may not show my best self. I may say things that I shouldn't say, whatever, because my filter is down. And so I have to say no to that meeting and say, can we reschedule? Or maybe I don't actually need to be the person in that meeting, and so learning to do that. One of the key things I think right now is not only setting boundaries, but resetting them, because I find that what has happened to me over and over, and to many people I know, is we set these great boundaries. We do a good job of taking care of ourselves for like a period of time, and then things just start to creep back up, and start to creep back in. And so taking a minute to like reset and do that, and you'll have to do it over and over again. It's not just a one-time thing where you say, I'm not going to work on weekends, the end. Like, okay, I'm not going to work on weekends, but what about this one weird weekend where this big catastrophe happened and we all need to pitch in or whatever? Okay, well, I'm going to work on that weekend. And now since I worked that weekend, I might as well work the next week. You have to kind of reset constantly. And I made a comment the other day, which is really just representative of where I've been multiple times during all of this. And that's that, like, I work so hard to set one boundary that the rest of them fall down. And so I have wild pigs rushing into my yard. And now I have one.
Is it literally you have wild pigs?
It feels
a metaphor.
No, that's not wild pigs. But I'm saying, like, I have one really good fence and I'm surrounded by pigs still, you know, like it's a constant, it's constantly working. But the more you can do that up front, the better you can take care of yourself. Because I think what happens for a lot of us is we don't realize it. The boundaries fall, and then we hit a wall. You know, like we just crash. Which I'm mixing all my metaphors now, but you know, you just crash, and then you have to work twice as hard to reset those boundaries. So if you can be a little bit more active in setting them, I'm giving advice to myself while I do this, by the way. Because I need to work on this too. And I know it. And I know if I've got people that know me that are watching this, they're like, you also need to work on that. But I think that saying no and resetting those can be really important. And then finally, I think knowing the thing that gets your brain out of your brain, right? Like for me, it's reading. That's about the only thing that will allow me to completely get out of my head. It's not TV. TV doesn't do that for me. I know it does for a lot of people, which is awesome. I like go for that. But for me, it's reading. For my partner, he has recently taken up woodworking. That totally allows him to engage in the project and really get out of his head. Craft stuff doesn't do it for me because that I find more like while I'm working on it, then my head just starts like cycling through everything that's been going on, right? Like, but for some people, you know, whatever it is, find what that is and make sure that you have time for that in almost every day. Right? Because for those of us that, a lot of us that experience anxiety, depression, any of the illnesses that feature some type of anxiety or depression, there's a lot of rumination, a lot of worry. And if we do not get out of our heads, we'll just cycle and cycle and get worse and worse. And I know, you know, while I have struggled to read news stuff because my brain just feels too tired, then I go back and reread old stuff. And so I think like for TV, sometimes that means going back and rewatching a favorite show or a movie or something, just enough to give your brain just a tiny bit of rest. A lot of times I find that when I go back to whatever I'm doing, I just feel like I've been able to reset. I'm not starting from the same place of, what if everything collapses about this? You know, I'm starting from a fresh place. And I may get back to the what if everything collapses point. Like it's probably going to happen, you know, but now it's going to take me a little bit longer to get there because I've reset in the middle of my day or my activity that I'm doing.
That was a TED Talk right there. That was like a treasure trove of resources, from the spoons analogy to, you know, like reassess and assess again and giving yourself grace. And I think the unique thing about higher ed and mental illness is there's such a level of perfection with also very limited resources. And then this like scarcity of resources because maybe there is. And it really comes together and clashes quite often. But we all think it's for the intent of our students. We're here to serve. And so we think the purpose is in the right direction, but they're the other direction. I think that's what the direction you're trying to point at. Of course, we need to support our students' mental health, but there's been a detriment to those that have committed themselves to this industry. And even how you shared about how, you know, like right now you and Sue aren't active with that project, but that's a conscious choice of reflection. And the book is so much about that. It's don't just produce and keep doing it for the sake of it. You know, like tell that story and be authentic. And the other reason why I love that example so much is like creating something with someone else. I know for me is something that I crave so much. So that was the other reason I was like, nope, this is staying in here for a million reasons. So there's so many cool takeaways. And again, that spoon analogy is so very interesting. And I don't know if you heard my dog in the background, like he's going blind and is just always an anxious dog, but he self-soothes by, you know, like shaking as dogs do, but he does it often. And so I have a little back injury right now, so I can't do some of the physical things that I used to do to have some of that coping, like running, especially in yoga was one of those. But sometimes for me, it's literally I have to move my body. I just realize, oh, you need to stand up or you need to stretch, or maybe I do shake my body like a dog because it just like resets up there. So So having that reflection and awareness, I think, is critical, because sometimes these tools can be great resources, but they also can be part of some triggers and problematic pieces too. So that's also
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've talked about some of this stuff a time or two. So, yeah, I can definitely go. There is also not, promise I'm not trying to be like all self-promoting, but there is a spoons like poster that you can print off on our site that Sue put together on the Committed Project site that goes through like an activity list. So you can kind of do that with, like, if you have a team of people that you're trying to explain this analogy to, that kind of helps you do that.
awesome. Love that. Well, my last question might feel a little self-promotional, since this is the book club for the book. And because you read the whole thing, and probably actually a few times, for how one has to edit a book, right? So what was something that pleasantly surprised you in what you consumed and edited, what ended up in the actual finished project?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key things that can be so hard when we're talking about social media, when we're talking about any of this, is that we often are coming to it, when we're talking to our colleagues, they're coming to it with one audience in mind. And there's not just one audience. And what the book does is it really talks about the different ways we can use social media for different audiences. So like at one point there's, and I'm sorry, like I've read this a while ago and I did read it and I do remember it, but I don't remember all the names of people. But there's somebody who's talking about like how they connect with students. And then on this other feature, we have somebody who's talking about how they connect with other people at community colleges and create this whole network around that. And so it's finding different ways of using social media to connect. Again, that's like a key thing in the book. It's about connection. But that there's the different ways people do that. And how important each of those is to creating like a more holistic portrait of somebody. Portrait's not the right word, but to be more authentic and real, like you do have to connect with different audiences. It's not all about, if you're a VP for student affairs, your only audience is not students, right? Like that you may connect with other VPs in student affairs or other, chief student affairs officers, to really connect and make a network there too, that there can be multiple opportunities with social media. And when you're doing something like that, you're never just talking to one at a time. You may be talking to another student affairs officer, but students may be seeing that as well. And so how to navigate that. And I think that was something that was really captured well in the book. And, like you've said, I love the features because I really think it shows it in action. It shows what you're talking about happening in action. It shows that it's possible to do, which I think is important.
Yeah. And there's no one way of like what works for you on a platform would not feel right for me, or, or the next person down at the other campus. So we have to really sit with it and sort through it. And then again, for you, you're driven by this bigger mission about mental health education. And that, of course, should come out in how you use platforms, or what color your hair is this week, or, like the book that you're reading. I hope what folks take away too is about relationships, but also I think it can be much simpler than we are thinking it has to be, in feeling like we have to produce some, again, like kind of perfect presence, especially if you want to connect with real people. Well, you're a real person yourself. So start to show that a little bit.
Yeah. And I think, kind of like what you said, and just to be like, to put a nice little bow on it, like I said, with mental health, like everybody's approach to how they take care of themselves is going to look different. And so they're going to need to maybe search and find that. It's very similar to everybody's approach to how they do social media is going to be a little bit different. And they're going to have to search and find that as well.
Awesome. Well, I have one more question for Kristen, and I'll open it up. If there are any questions, please add them. Whatever platform you're watching in, we can see them over here on this platform called StreamYard. If there are any questions, drop them into the chat so we can see them. But as a book nerd, Kristen, what is a book that you're reading right now?
So I've been reading some young adult fantasy books. And I can't even remember what the name of the book is I'm reading right now. That's how bad I am. But I did just finish reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle, which was amazing. It was really good. And it was what I needed right now, too, I think, which can be really important. So, yeah, those. And then I've been kind of dabbling in some other nonfiction books, but I have not gotten very far with many of those right now. It's like my brain is done at the end of a day. And so anything that's not fiction at this point is very challenging for me to read. Untamed was a little bit easier because it's kind of little short snippets and essays. So I was able to pick it up and then put it down at various times. So
yeah, reading went right out the window once we went into quarantine, unfortunately. I also found I would read like while traveling, or if I was at the gym, like on a machine. That was when I was doing a lot of reading. So anyway, I am also reading Untamed slowly. But yes, I like the bite-sized chapters. It's very helpful. Yeah. Unfortunately, my book, I'm sorry, it's not bite-sized chapters.
No. The features are bite-sized. And so you can like read a feature and learn a little bit about that. And you can come back to it later if you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for folks that you might have questions, or if you're watching the replay, please add those in the chat. We'll check them out later to make sure that that if you've got questions, we are here to help connect and answer them. So Kristen, thank you so much for helping me break the ice on this new series. Again, so fun to connect with you as a colleague, a friend, an editor, like all the names of lists that you are to me. And of course, to be able to talk about this really important topic. I hope some folks can catch this later and share it with folks that might need to hear some of the research that you talked about, and not just wait to get, I don't know what, I think you're in chapter 6 or something. That's way too many chapters to learn about her and the Committed Project. So this is the internet version of a quick cheat sheet for the book.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Josie. It's awesome. And thanks for including us in the book. I really appreciate that too.
Of course. All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me on this first of the book club series. As a reminder, join me over at the Digital Leadership Network starting this weekend. We're going to be kicking off this network to continue conversations, reflect out on exercises from the book, and just overall navigating social media, technology, and leadership in 2020. And next week, I am going to be joined by Matt Reed. He's the Vice President for Learning at Brookdale Community College and a writer for InsideHigherEd.com. He talks a whole lot about advocating for community colleges and how, like Kristen talked about, digital storytelling helped amplify not only issues that were important to him, but his career. So I'm excited to have Matt on next week. Okay, y'all, do take very good care, and we will see you next week. Bye.